Timothy Matz. Am I saying that right?
Matz.
Matz. Go hard on the A there. Tim Matz from Ashland in Southern Oregon, who has done our recovery trainer certification, and it has kind of a wealth of experience with a lot of different movement practices. And I'm stoked to kind of hear about the background that you've been through and kind of what movement was able to add to your practice. And I guess that's really just the first place to start for someone who's not familiar with you, and maybe they've seen you on your blowing up Instagram, move like human, which is 80 times its followership in the last like 3 months, which that's got to be quite the trip. But yeah, what's kind of the story of Tim? How did you get to the point where you are now, where you're helping people get out of pain? You've kind of got your own approach to living in accordance to nature and in your own wild way. How did that all begin?
Wow. Well, I mean, ever since I was a teenager, I just was pretty disenchanted with what I saw around me and where I grew up. And I always wanted to rebel and kind of find my own way. And so that ultimately led me to punk rock music, hardcore music, where I was able to like find solace and find community. And but I was also just a straight up degenerate and was destroying myself. And yeah, I turned the corner hard. One friend in my life who's still a good friend of mine, I say he basically saved my life. And he just lived a different way. He just lived like really simple and connected to nature. He spent time by himself. And I was like nihilistic at the time and thought he was just an interesting character. So I started to hang around him. And yeah, he saved my life. I started like fasting and getting into moving my body and just taking care of myself and just removing myself from all the toxicity that I surrounded myself with. And that led me to meditation practice, mindfulness practice. And it was all downhill from there. I ended up finding a teacher that I wanted to go study with in Crestone, Colorado. And I went and lived with him on retreat for 6 years in the mountains. And that's where I got into horses. And I think that's where I ultimately really got into training from the perspective of self-cultivation, because he loved practice. He just loved like all these different modalities of practice, like martial arts, internal martial arts. He was doing like body work on himself, like these like Taoist forms of like stomach body work and all this stuff. And he was the most dynamic and alive man, I think, to this day that I've ever met. You know, he could like work like 70 hours a week on a computer as a brilliant programmer and then just be like beaming and like so alive out into the world. And like yeah, so he was my mentor for some years. And from there, actually, when I was living out there, then I was like really obsessed with training. And I did some online coaching with Ido Portal's team like 10 years ago. And I did that for like 6 months. And that's where I really fell in love with that whole generalist aspect of practice. But I feel like that carried on into like my whole way of living. And then I was lucky enough to be introduced to some backcountry hunters, and that started to make sense to me a lot as far as like stacking activities and just living a healthy, connected life as far as like the human animal is concerned. And now I've just kind of then from there I just went on into exploring so many different modalities and did MoveNat, went through their trainings. What else did I do? Went through FRC and Kinstretch and all their trainings. Just love movement and just loved getting into all of it. And yeah, went through functional patterns as an attempt to fix my shit because I got injured trimming horses about 1.5 years ago. And a lot of what they were talking about made sense to me. They're like, I felt like Naudi was asking some good questions. And I've always tried to look at life like through that kind of biological lens. And anyway, that took me down a bit of a training with them, but I couldn't fix myself. And that's when I found you guys. and and yeah, I'm grateful for the things that I gleaned from that camp, and also really grateful to not be enmeshed in that culture. And yeah, and that led me to you guys, and kind of realizing that I wasn't going to be able to fight tension with tension to fix my shit, and I couldn't force myself out of the pain and constriction that I was in, and it wasn't really until I started tending the nervous system that my body actually just unwound. I wasn't actually even injured, is what I think. Um, and yeah, and so now I'm here. Now all my clients train MoveMed. It's foundational to everybody I work with, and it's just been really, really cool. It's been really cool to see how it's affected people at a really fundamental level.
What was your back issue at the time that you were trying to sort out?
Yeah, so I also trim horses' hooves, and that's something I learned when I was living on retreat. I ended up becoming a professional hoof care practitioner and doing that throughout the San Luis Valley in Colorado. And then when I moved out here to Southern Oregon, I picked up a clientele. And horses are big creatures that don't always cooperate, and not all horse owners keep their horses managed and cooperative. They're not trained, and so I was just in a sticky situation with a client. Bless her heart, I really liked her. She's this old lady that had adopted a bunch of horses, and these horses didn't cooperate very well. And one day, I get into a position where it's like almost like a Wing Chun kind of like martial arts stance where I'm like collapsed at the femur and I'm hunched over. And typically I've been okay being in that position. But they'll pull their leg out from between my legs because I'm holding their foot between my legs. And so when that happens, I would reach around and grab it and it would pull me, like that. And so I'd get into these crazy torqued, violent positions. And I think the main thing was that I was so heightened emotionally when the injury happened. It wasn't even an actual moment that I remember, but I was so aggravated with the client and with the horses that I was just like so charged emotionally. I think that really impacted how my body held onto that moment in time. And yeah, I mean, I couldn't even tie my shoes for like 8 months, like without like almost losing my breath, just like curled over, just so constricted. And I can honestly say that I'm like 96% better. And it's like but what I notice now is that when I get stressed, whether it's like I've been on my phone too much because of all the stuff I got to do on the internet now, or whatever, I didn't get sleep from the kids. It's like it's really highlighted the reality of how stress affects the body, how stress affects tension, and contributes to pain.
With working with animals as much as you do you see a correlative between like the base levels of just stress factors, how something might anticipate by way of noise or fast movement or something or the other, that humans and animals are similarly affected by like, I don't know, basic levels of input?
100%. I mean, actually, since I've prioritized recovery, the nervous system, my ability to handle all the inputs coming in, because I got to pay attention to a horse. I'm watching its head, I'm watching its ears, making sure that we're in a good way as I'm working with it. I usually have a client talking to me. I'm outside, so there's all sorts of sounds. There's the elements. There's whatever tussle I got into with my wife. If it happened to be that morning, whatever it is, it's all that stuff. And I've had such a greater capacity to actually just relax and just respond. I mean, I've been actually, like, the last time I trimmed horses a few weeks ago was maybe the most dangerous time I've ever trimmed horses. Um, Another client whose horses are a little less on the cooperative side, and big horses. They're these gypsy horses. They're kind of like a draft breed with huge hooves, super heavy, long hair on their hooves, makes it hard for me to hold their feet. And I was on the hind hoof, and the horse yanked. It was the last moment of my time there, and the horse yanked its hind leg forward, which pulled me under the horse almost. And I was able just to brace properly and just like get out of the way. Like, I've just been amazed at my ability to just react, and while also being relaxed. I just love it, dude. I'm so grateful to you guys, man. It's revolutionized my ability to get underneath horses in a safe way. I thought at one point I was gonna have to just like stop doing it, and I don't need to do it for money at this point, but I like doing it. I just love horses, and I feel like it's just good work. You know, it's like keeps my hands and wrists super strong. Um, I just like the smell of horses. You know, horses are just amazing. They're like dinosaurs to me. So uh, yeah, a lot of correlation for sure.
It's very cool to hear you process the impact it has on you relative all the frameworks you've gone through. I mean, I'm sure you could quantify all kinds of different things for what stress means to the body, but having a tooling system that works for you is pretty impactful.
Yeah.
I'm curious, when you get into a position where you're I don't know, when you think about your stress or you're thinking about the burden on your system, does it seem more tangible now that you have like physical tools for it as opposed to having to like process it in the mind and break it down through elements, whatever they may be?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I have a broader vision, so to speak, of like my internal world. And it's interesting because it's like I used to have that really acutely when I was on retreat because I was doing practice all the time. I was spending so much time just aware of my body three-dimensionally that like I was able to deal with my stress in such a easier way. It really pays to have an internal mapping of your body. That's why I think these sensory practices are absolute gold. And then when I left retreat and I entered into the world and got a family and had kids, horses, you name it, all the stuff, right? Um, my sitting practice took a back seat, and my practice changed, right? Like my reflections and my cultivation turned to being, you know, child rearing and stuff like this. And but these practices have brought me back into having that, but brought me back to my internal practice essentially, which is why I remember, Nate, I asked you in the very beginning, I was like, have you practiced like internal cultivation practices? Because I feel like this stuff is like very relevant, like to Kriya yoga and these different internal practices, like the midline convergence breath that we practice is like, to me, of it's it's down regulating for the nervous system, but I find it to be much more than that. It's like it's a deeper practice, and it just touched me back into that. And so I'm super grateful for that too, that reminder, and to bring me back into that space. And so now when I'm dealing with stress, I'm just more aware of how it's affecting me in real time instead of like waking up or like just finding myself in pain or discomfort and being like, how the fuck did I get here? I can see it all a little more.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Well, I can appreciate that you have a different aspect of self attention or self responsibility in that taking account for it or the burden of emotions and making sure that it's still not like uh, doing the damage it could be doing to your outside environment is a hard process. And so going into the environment that you're saying retreat, where I imagine it was like it was fostering that kind of positivity and the like, you have a pretty good experience for what it is to, I don't know, see the far end of what being in a good environment, putting the work toward it, all that kind of stuff can do for you. But at the same time, I think you also really exemplify a cool, I want to be a part of reality. I want to have like a normal life. I don't want to just like remove myself entirely from what is normal social engagement. I mean, if there's a lesser quality or standard of social engagement, and if I'm going back into a normal setting, how is it that I qualify finding the same value? And you've clearly done a number of those things, taking it upon yourself to be like, okay, if it's the onus is not on them to find the value for me, then uh, the uh, working with horses, um, going and living with this guy and doing a variety of things that not just horses, but you appreciate the scope of things, and in your own right started to apply that hunting. It's a cool thing to watch because I think the map can't be enriched without there being I say selfish, and I only mean to say you can't provide selfless without that root word retained, which is self. And as you foster a better version of self or a more robust version of self, you have that ability to maybe create space, but more often than not, share something that may be incomplete in someone else's mind, or share feelings that may be more robustly communicable because you spent more time really working through it, not relying on whatever it may be. So I commend you for your dynamic humanity.
Yeah, I totally agree. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for seeing me. Yeah, I mean, I've wanted. I love being helpful, and I've loved like showing up for my family. I think that was like one of the things that was really bred into me by my dad, and I just don't think that we can be that helpful if we're not taking care of ourselves in a real way. Like we have to prioritize ourselves. You have to put on your oxygen mask first, right? I mean, it's like if you can't breathe, like what are you going to do for people? And the whole
Yeah.
world's melting down because they're in a stress state, and the world is kind of like pigeonholed us into being in chronic stress and profiting off our chronic stress. And so like if I'm going to help my kids to not do that, if I'm going to help my wife, whoever's around me, then I have to be regulated. Like I have to be solid so that I can be a mirror for them. And so that motivates me big time, like in my practice. And yeah, I think the practice is the most selfless thing you can do, because like you cultivate yourself into being a mirror, and to emulating that for people like your kids and stuff like this.
True.
It's a interesting kind of perspective on family that you think was kind of given to you early on, whereas I kind of want to dig into that a little bit. What do you think, or how do you think your father instilled that in you? What was kind of the impetus that made you, as you aged, carry that same value?
Well, yeah, I don't know if it happened in like such a yeah. I love my dad. He's following my world now on with this whole situation that's happening. So I always want to be conscious of him. And it's like our parents did whatever they could do, right? Like they did the best they could do with the cards they were dealt. And like we can point the finger back forever. And it's just like trauma inherited upon generation. And so he's not perfect. I'm not perfect. And but what he did give me, and even though we had a hard time, we've come a long way. But what he did give me back in the day was like this. I was like a hard ass kid, and I wasn't like a big kid. I wasn't really a tough kid intrinsically, but I hung with some tough kids, and then he just gave me like a certain kind of like dog inside myself. Um, and he always encouraged me to like stand up for my brothers and things like this. And my brothers would get picked on, and like for better or for worse, he would be like, take care of it. And so we just had like a ride or die kind of mentality about our family. And I got into some trouble with that, and later grew out of that kind of um, polarized, violent way of standing up for my family and identifying with my tribe, so to speak. And but I kept the importance of family, and like putting family first. And then that kind of grew and expanded um, outside of my immediate family circle. And yeah, so it's interesting because it's like I don't think he was necessarily really giving me that. He was mostly encouraging me to fight for my brothers. And so um I'm not proud of how violent I was. Honestly, I don't even really like talking about it because I just like people got hurt. I got hurt. Um, Not all of it was totally justified, even though sometimes it was. And I don't condone violence. I like maintaining a level of dangerousness and like being able to take care of myself and the people around me or people who need help. But um, yeah, he taught me to fight without even fighting. Like he gave me um, a certain pride that in and of itself I don't think is a good thing. But it like I took the gold from that and carried it into like just trying to be a healthy, responsible, masculine figure for my family. And um, yeah, I think that's it.
I do think violence is a tempering element. I mean, any degree of we can talk into the foo-foo and talk about like what isn't recognized or established science or what is like trespasses into maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but there's a degree of corollary between what emotion you like you hold on to or what emotion you're most consistent with and like your how you exhibit yourself. And if you're in a more morose state or saddened state, it's a depressive quality on your system. And being in an anger state is, although depressive, it is the most like energetic version of I don't want to be in this state, maybe, or maybe I can change it, or there are degrees of transition that exist a little bit more in one's control or in one's own admission of control. So being able to temper that natural institution, like it's in all of us, especially in little boys. So if there's a degree of being able to temper that and being able to coordinate it, clearly there needs to be a little more guidance and a little more verbalization around what it is that you're identifying with, not in just little kid brain, but an
Yeah,
adult needs to play a part in that. But in some way or another, you touched on something very natural for us and you handled it in such a way that you're still here to make decisions for the next round.
yeah, I think that's really valuable too. And I see that with my boys. Like my Quill is 6.5, Addie is 4.5, and then Angus is 1. And it's just been really interesting to see their violence, like their the way they move energy. And obviously kids are all different, and but there's something natural about their combativeness and how they move energy. And I feel, and it's scary, I think, for parents. I think it's scary for parents who haven't been exposed to violence. And I grew up 3 boys, you know, so I was in that boy culture too. And I feel poised. Like I feel like I'm in a good position to be able to not let anyone get hurt, but like allow energy to move and allow understanding to come through from my own experience while not demonizing their feelings. And yeah, it's been really interesting. Yeah, interesting you're saying that because I'm living that right now with these boys.
Yeah, I think that's a natural proclivity of boys. All my brothers broke each other's nose in some fashion or other.
Right.
How do you think a parent who doesn't feel comfortable with that could go about, making themselves more comfortable with it? Is it essentially like trying to do something that instills some form of violence in themselves, whether that's again like hitting the heavy bag or like there has to be just an understanding of their own physicality first before they can have like a chance to help handle the physicality of a 3-year-old boy or a 6-year-old boy.
100%. Yeah, I mean that's kind of what I'm trying to encourage people to do is like embody physicality so that you're that mirror for your kids. And I feel like when you've touched in on like the ability to potentially inflict harm, like when you have that capability and maybe you have real world experience doing it, maybe you just train, you know, maybe you do jujitsu, maybe you do kickboxing or boxing. maybe you just wrestle for fun. And I feel like once you actually have some experience, then it's not so scary, because I think it's like, it's scary. I see it happen to Fallon, my wife, where she's a bit overwhelmed by it. Like, I don't know, like, I just don't know what to do, you know? And I just feel like it's just, for one, I think the human animal is a rough and gruff creature, you know?
What
And
what you just said is interesting. I don't mean to interrupt, but I wanted to
yeah,
before we move on to the next.
yeah, please.
She wants to socialize with the interaction, but she doesn't know where she could fit in without interrupting the engagement. Like if we look at anything that is human behavior, it's socialization. Like we talk about eat, sleep, reproduce, and aside that, survival is pretty well to do. I mean, we figure it out fairly simply in the modern world. So what it comes down to is a large portion of what we divide our attention to is the social factors, and that is like if you're in a space and you're noticing that people are vibing with each other, so to speak, and you're not in that wavelength, or you're not like participating, and you don't know how to invite yourself in. Oftentimes, it's a measure of like coincidental heartbeats, coincidental like heart rate variability. So it's not quite like everyone's intense as much as they are experiencing a fluidity between engaged intensity, a little bit of focus, ambient awareness. Like it's the allowance of behaviors through reflex as opposed to behaviors through like primary. This is what I'm focusing on. This is what I want to achieve. This is what's going to happen. And when you can match people's behaviors without being a psychopath, it's a really wonderful thing.
For sure. Yeah, I love all that.
So it's cool that she wants to participate. I think everyone just needs to understand the majority of the things that anyone wanting to participate is usually just learning to socialize, not necessarily the action or the activity. It's the thing that's important to whomever it is important to that person. But
Yeah, and I mean, there's so much we can go into right here, right around parenting, and the internal capacity to handle inputs from your environment. I mean, like, just the ability, and like, bless her heart, she's more stressed than me because she sleeps even less because we have a 1 year old boy who's
mm,
going through his developmental changes, and it's hard. It's hard, and it's hard on a nuclear family, and hard on moms even more than dads, in my opinion. And so I just want to give it up for her and all the energy she puts in for our family. But like, if you're stressed out and you're not even aware of it, like, your ability to not react aggressively when your kids are getting violent, because that's the impulse, right? You want to like get big, and you want to like dominate, but like, that's not what we want to teach our kids, right? And so you have to be able to have the capacity to not react, and to like, to be solid and calm and reflexive. Like, you need to be able to actually get in the middle and keep someone from getting hurt, separate it, not get big, help them start to articulate, help the other to see through the other's eyes. Let's have everybody be understood. And all of this is increasingly hard if we're contracted and we're stuck in a stress state. And so that's another just thing that I see the benefit of these practices is like, just cultivating the ability to be present and non-reactive from an unconscious standpoint, like being able to be like, yeah, just like respond like a cat to the environment, but like in your relationship with your kids, you know?
Yeah, maybe you don't want to necessarily speak for her, but what are the things that she uses? Because I've seen her like laying under the bag and then doing stuff with you. Like, what's the stuff that she tends to gravitate towards to kind of keep herself in check?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's like, all the reasons that people come together are so vast and varied, and each person brings unique things to a relationship for the other person to grow through, and see through their lens. And like, physicality and training has not been her strong suit, so that's her growth edge, is cultivating her physicality, tending to her nervous system. You know, she didn't have that foundation, started having babies, and so it's been challenging for her, but she's really turned a corner, especially since we came together. Since we came together, she's taken on a whole new relationship with training, and she was doing her banded neck work this morning. You know, when I just turned the corner, she's doing her thing. So she's putting a lot more attention into that. Deep pressure therapy, 100%. We just leave the sandbag in the living room. Anybody who comes over is doing deep pressure therapy. Quill does deep pressure therapy. You know, he wants more and more weight. He's like, let's see, the kid weighs like 45 pounds or something. He's got more than half his body weight on his chest, you know? And awesome. Yeah, he's doing jujitsu now too. And just amazing to watch kids develop when you give them the space to be themselves and to move freely. And I'm just so excited to watch him grow up, man. He's just such a phenom. It's so cool. Yeah, we're talking about foul. That's right. Yeah, she's doing yeah, it's like the pelvic floor plyo, banded neck training, bite training. You know, she wasn't breastfed very long. You know, she was cut off breastfeeding when she was like 3 months old, I think, maybe even 2 months old. Her mom got in a car accident and wasn't able to breastfeed her. And yeah, so she's, you know, like a lot, man, moms have to lie on their side all the time and breastfeed at night and stuff like this. And it's just, its effect on the structure is, yeah, I feel like MoveMed for moms to be and postpartum moms is like its whole own thing. Like they need it so much because it's such a stressful thing. But she's doing great. She's doing a lot better. Honestly, feeling the best that she's ever felt in her body at the moment.
It's awesome to hear. I mean, to that effect, we are looking into getting a female to deliver those kinds of things. I mean, I'm in the works with someone in mind, but it doesn't sound so good with me coming into the play like, hey ladies, this is how you got to do this.
Let's talk about your pelvic floor.
Yeah, they're like, shut up, shut your mouth.
What's
How old are you, 12?
How's the how have you changed the way you're kind of like assessing and looking at your clients now, Tim? Like, is it are there people you've been working with for a long time that you're like, oh, I kind of we had this switch gears and kind of find a different source point of here's the things you need to focus on to get them to where they wanted to go? Do you have clients where it's a little bit more like performance based, where now you're like, oh, you're regulated, like we've kind of got your foundations here, now we just get to kind of play? Like what's sessions with your clients kind of looking like these days?
Yeah, it's super unique to each person, you know? And I think I learned that from you guys too. Like, especially you, Ben, like there's even like when you had like Fal had a session with you and like I heard about it and like, and that's something I learned from you, like when you were teaching, it was like, you don't just like come with like a set like prescription for every single person. Like I don't think that that's how a good coach develops. Like it takes real deep listening and like attention to what someone's history is and like what they're going through right now and like where they're headed. So like you have to take into account their past, their trauma, their injuries, like where they're at today. Heck, like even their relationships that are going on and all the things that affect stress. Because honestly, most people that come train with me are afraid to move. They're afraid to pick things up. They're afraid to move through the landscape, and they're walking around on eggshells, so to speak. And so for that reason, everybody gets the nervous system training. But yeah, it's like, for instance, like there's this one kid I've been training, and he's just like, we've progressed so far. I think specifically because of the movement practices that he's gotten out of fear of moving. He's way more reflexive. We've just worked the foundations to the proper level that now he can actually just play. Like now he's back and playing basketball, pickup games. Now we're just getting into some more traditional strength stuff, and he's just getting like big and strong, and like he's just a completely changed person. And you know how it is as a coach. Like not everybody comes to you, is willing to put in the work, like will stick with you forever for whatever reasons. But like the people that do stick with me and are willing to go through the foundations, even though they're not like the sexiest forms of training, they get the greatest return. And it's amazing to watch those people go. Like there's a 16-year-old kid I train, and he's just like super uncoordinated. He's a tennis player, and just kind of in a goofy phase of coming up. And like to be able to support him with the foundational training that I learned from you guys, plus actual just plyometrics and all the other things that we can bring to an athlete. He's just like grown up. Like he's just growing up. It's just cool to watch him grow up. And so, some people, we work the foundations for a really, really long time because they're having a really hard time, and it's a process. And it takes so much nuance and listening, and getting rid of any agenda I have for what I think they need, and just like prior to just finding out what they actually need through listening and watching. And so unique. I work with one lady with rheumatoid arthritis, and like she can't use one of her arms, and had to really work a lot of the foundations for a long time, and she's making amazing progress. Amazing progress.
What seems to help in that case the most? What kind of are the go-tos? I don't know if you're trying to actually like bring back function to that arm, or if it's just about kind of like making sure the whole structure doesn't get completely thrown off by the imbalance.
Yeah, I mean the arm, all of that. I mean the arm has bone spurs in the elbow, so it's like I don't know what we can actually do about it. We apply resistance. I do a lot of like strong camps style, like hands-on resistance for her, because it's hard to quantify what kind of load she needs if she's pressing, or if she's rowing, or lifting a leg or any of that stuff. So I'm doing a lot of hands-on stuff and engaging her. And we've been focusing a lot on midline health, like from the palate to the pelvic floor, like making sure that has enough internal stability, and like the ability to brace, and the ability to just be solid in her spine. And that's translated a lot to her being able to get really strong, like through her hip flexor, and bringing her leg up. I mean, honestly, she's gotten super, super strong. It's amazing. I actually, for some of the exercises, I can't do hands-on anymore because she'll just move me. But nonetheless, I don't know how much we've seen change in the actual arm, but she's like a soldier. She's like, that stuff doesn't get her down at all. She's amazing work ethic. Never misses a session. And I mean, just her experience of feeling her body three-dimensionally, feeling the ground when she moves, like feeling her body moving as an integrated unit. She's super stoked, so her quality of life has gone up big time. Range of motion in the arm, I'm not sure. I don't know if we'll ever be able to deal with it, but nonetheless, just improving, and that's what I think is cool, is like you can help people improve even if they're not going to do a ring muscle up or something like that.
You were talking earlier on the not walking into things with an agenda. Have you, in my experience, I think most people jump into the comment section of Instagram or my DMs to some degree or another. They're coming in with either an agenda that's been communicated to them, or their own underlying practical experience or perspective. What is fitness? What is the body? And more often than not, there's kind of like an A, B, and C that they have to accommodate before they can get through learning new materials. So to say like, hey, can you teach me? I need these things. You give them something that they may not have expected to hear. They'll rebut with, yeah, what about this? And if the question had been posed to them in the first place saying, what do you think needs to be done? they would have told you, hey, do this, do this, do this. And if we were to get that out of the way for most people, there'd probably be a pretty clear understanding of what, perhaps it's not an intentional agenda, but most people walk into an experience or with a social encounter or relationship with some degree of expectation, because they're carrying around with them some like neurological encumberments. And so, I mean, this woman's a good example of someone who, because she doesn't have options or she doesn't know what those options are, but she doesn't want to feel the degradation hit her as impactfully as like a depreciated limb could for the whole brain. She's making the best of it. And a lot of
Yeah.
people, because they have a full vessel that works well enough, there's not really enough tangible injury, they have enough space to kind of accumulate stress and call it bigger than it is. How do you, in your experience, if you disagree, feel free to let me know. How, in your experience, do you handle someone who comes to you with their uh, bias or their agenda, and you without yours? How do you communicate what is the best way to go when you don't have that same vested clarity on what it is they want?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's like people are only ready for whatever they are ready for. So those coaching relationships usually just like fizzle out for me. If it's like if someone comes and I'm like, and the level that I want to interact with my clients at is vulnerable. It's I think it's a bit scary for some people, because I want to know about where they've been. I want to know what's happened to them. I actually want all that data so that I can actually make the best coaching decision. Because I mean, even just putting hands on someone, which I feel like is important. You do a lot of hands-on work, like you just where have people been? How are they going to respond to this input? And so,
Totally.
I have
But
my understanding of where I've been and what I see to be a balanced approach to working with most people. But for some people, they don't want that. Some people just want like bigger glutes. And I'm like, I'm just not here for that work. I think you go to like, what was it, Brett Contreras or whatever, that guy, go to him for the glutes, like
Glute Lab.
I'm trying to like, I'm trying to go deep with people so that they can know themselves better. And there's no guarantee that you're going to get rid of anything, or like it's more about understanding for yourself where you've been, what's happening in your body, and to know yourself better. And that's hard. That's a level of like application that I think is really scary for people. And yeah, so if people come and I'm the questions I ask and the things that I recommend, if they're just not ready for that, like it just fizzles out naturally. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. I just wanted to hear your perspective. I mean, it's something that I deal with on a regular basis, and I think it kind of it works in my favor that I have such competent people like Ben who can offer an alternative to my coaching style. In that, if someone is in a state of having expected a number of things and they're not clear on what it is that I'm offering, then I think there's a degree of, oh man, that can take place for some people. I mean, for some people, it's exactly what's needed. And I mean, we're all children at the end of the day in some respect. Like there's certain aspects of our own character that there's not a single person I've ever met who has every facet of their character handled. I've only seen people who know how to decelerate their reactivity by way of, I've taken this and I've put it over there, or I've put a wall up to make sure that there's some degree of I can't respond immediately. But never have I seen someone who's fully authentic and can be angry without being all sorts of things otherwise. I think that it's a choice to not experience a degree of your emotions, and some people are choosing to live a life that they have manufactured in their mind as being the ideal, when they don't make allowances for what is natural and what is real. And if we were to be less surreal about stuff, we'd see, okay, maybe I need to be angry right now because I have no other option other than my brain and body are experiencing some degree of intensity that I don't know how to downregulate. So this is practice time. It's not a practice I asked for. This is like after school detention. You're like, I did ask for it, but I did not ask for it. And if we could kind of be clear about that in future, so knowing that that like to not have it happen, you kind of have to improve upon where you're at. And many people don't make that choice because either the mirrors in their environment, the people who would otherwise be the example, are doing the exact same kind of, that goes over there, let's put that there. We've really organized this environment of chaos super nicely, as opposed to, if you're struggling, experience it, let people experience you to the degree that you're able to communicate it, and then also learn how, as a human being that socializes, where you need to draw the line between socializing and experiencing your own self relationship, because there's a difference between like talking to your brain and then talking to another person.
Totally, man. Yeah, I agree with all that.
Just rambling.
Love it.
Maybe go for a walk for that part before. If we could edit, go for a walk.
Now's a good,
Right,
good
Beck.
time to start moving. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I tend to be more on the, I tend to be a people pleaser just by nature. So if I'm in that kind of environment where somebody's coming to me for something where it's pretty clear to me they need something else, I will maybe try to kind of, you know, slip in the medicine with their ice cream or whatever. I'll be willing to kind of cater to them and kind of their current understanding of things, but try to educate along the way. And there's definitely some people where it's just like it doesn't work out. I'm not going after their idealized version of themselves nearly hard enough in the way that they think that they need to, in a way that demands all this like this burnout, I guess. And that's something that I guess people kind of almost look for in a trainer, is somebody who's going to push them to the absolute edge of what they can handle. And I do that in most sessions, but it's in a different context than they're used to. It's actually like, oh, I'm only going to push you to the point where you can handle this while maintaining this slow cadence of breath, or the point where I can see you starting to squint and starting to like constrict. Yeah, I could push you another 5 minutes in this exercise. I could make you do another 150 squats and you'll burn out, but then you're going to be left with just a ball of tension to deal with and carry that's going to feel like 30 pounds for the rest of your day. And I would have a conscious about that personally. So there's an element of, yeah, and maybe someone like Nate isn't quite so willing to kind of go along with their bullshit for enough time to maybe have them. And that's where they come to me, and maybe I'm able to kind of guide them a little bit more, or like you know, yeah, give them their treats, so to speak. And I think there's skill to that. But I also think some people, I think my approach will not create the same kind of impact as the kind of approach Nate might take with somebody else. Like I've had somebody who's came to me like a few months after a session with Nate, where Nate was very like clear cut to the point, and it wasn't a pleasant interaction from what I heard, but the guy came to me a few months after and was like, it was exactly what I needed to hear. And he was saying like the first couple of weeks of like going through it, like he was pissed off about it. He like did not want to like try to integrate it or whatever, but he kind of like got over his own stuff, like heard what was actually being said, and it completely like opened the door. And then, you know, he comes to me and we're able to kind of build from the ground up, now that his like own inhibitions, his own like self-imposed walls have been kind of smashed through with a very different approach. So there's definitely a time and place for both. Tim, is that
Yeah.
something where you find yourself kind of, you've got your kid gloves and then you've got the people who almost need to be smacked around a little?
Well, it sounds like you guys make an amazing team, because I've been coached by both of you and you're both awesome coaches. And I think like what you said, there's a real skill to that, because you do need to meet people where they're at. And on the other level, like my first teachers who I went and lived on with Retreat, like his wife, it was a married couple that I lived with, and I feel like she shaped me more than anyone in this world. And like she ran me into the ground. She didn't give a shit about my personality. She didn't give a shit about what I my feelings. She didn't give a shit about like anything really. As I look back, she loved her horses, I'll tell you that. But like there was a real medicine in that for me, because I was just like so yin, and like when I got there, I just, I just didn't get cult. I was an uninitiated man, like most people in the Western world. I just didn't get initiated as a young man, except in some fist fights and whatever when I was a kid. I wasn't initiated. And she shaped me by just having me like move my energy, and she broke down aspects of my story that were shaping my body. And so there's medicine in Nate's approach 100%, and then there's also a tact in being able to meet someone where they're at, because when you meet someone, a client, and you can just tell, right, like you can tell that they're going to be a good client as far as like showing up and like being able to receive your guidance and like apply themselves and do the work. And but they might not be they might not be quite ready for the full truth, or so to speak, so being able to like give them that thing that they want, while also trickling in the medicine, like homeopathic doses of the medicine, until they're ready to take the tincture, so to speak. Like I feel like there's a lot of tact in that, so I applaud you for doing that. And I try to be in there somewhere, like I try to be in there, and try to be as dynamic as I can with people, and just show up how I can for them. And I mean, my coaching is changing. It's like when some of the men that come to coach with me now, like they actually want to just talk to me, and we talk for an hour, and I mirror for them. And like some of these guys, they're stronger than me. They're like big, strong dudes. They're actually they're needing connection and reflection. And so it's like there's just so much more to life than just like how much weight you can push, and like what movement skills you have. Like at the end of the day, like none of that shit means anything to me. It really doesn't. Like, are we cultivating good? Are we supporting people and becoming better people? Are they feeling inspired and motivated to like show up for their family, to help their neighbor, like just to be good people, good humans? Like that's the level that I want to coach on. And so it's been really nice actually to see that my coaching is moving more in that direction. I program for people, I have them training, but we're going in different directions too. We're talking on deeper levels and applying ourselves in relationship with ourselves, but in relationship with others too.
Was going to say something. Oh, I think it was appropriate for me to add to that effect. I appreciate your compliment in us being good trainers in our own right. I'm not just exclusively an asshole. I don't know if something shit on me just now, but it kind of felt like it. I'm not just an asshole, so I am very willing to like create a space that's not quite exactly what someone wanted. But it does create some clarity as to, hey, look, if we're gonna get to the brass tacks of things, you have to look at some things that I'm seeing, and then once you see these things and you can interact with them, then we can kind of communicate at level. But right now, there's kind of a construction zone that I'm not allowed in, that you're reinforcing. Until that's handled, I'm not your guy. And
Totally.
If there are people, which there are a number of, and they're typically more intense individuals that are more experienced with effort, so like athletes, and then martial artists, or people with long history of injury that they've tried to practically face and like try to be a person on the other side of. And when there's enough real stimulus, you don't really make that false stimulus kind of, what am I interacting with today? What am I interacting with today? What am I? You look at the thing that's making you suffer and you deal with it, or you suffer. So I kind of want to phrase for a lot of people, and I think it's an experience I've had since a young child. There are a number of my friends who have thought themselves super mature from a young age, and they were more emotionally stable than I was, having dealt with less than I was dealing with to a degree, or at least less complicated things. And the inordinance of how we make simple things complicated and complicated things simple is relative to our ability to kind of compress the image and over time figure out how to behave with it. And a lot of people will kind of just dress around. Oh, I see all these people acting, since I've never experienced something real, I'm going to act. But seeing someone who loses a parent all of a sudden in mid-20s or later, it's a pretty severe trauma for someone. Seeing someone get into an accident and lose a limb, it's a tremendous trauma for someone. And these things, if you're not prepared in some shape or form to kind of handle what it's like to be your own worst enemy and to have very little strength to walk up the stairs, what are you going to do to make your situation change? And so that's a large portion of why I put an onus on, hey, dummy, I know things seem good to you right now. I know it. But if we're trying to qualify where you're trying to go and you don't know how to get there, could we at least pay attention to maybe the chain that you're calling you has some weak links in its length, and you're focusing on all these shiny ones. But if any one of those weak ones breaks, you no longer have a chain, you have a segmented, disassociated vehicle. So I like to just make the point of, yeah, we all have great potential. We could all be beautiful butterflies that fly around and pollinate each other and be like fab and whatever. But you're all mushy caterpillars that need to go through your fucking mush mode, your mashed potato mode, in order to get to that point. So let's figure out how to like break down the foundation, build it from at least like an intentional positive. And when you start to understand these weak points, you're like, oh, I don't have to work on everything. I don't have to hold this up while I'm doing this. Maybe I could just do that on a walk.
Yeah, man. Well, I just want to say too that I do not think you're an asshole. I think that you're honest, and I think that you're direct. And I think that we need more of that in the world, because I think that people skirt around protecting other people's feelings so often that they're not authentic with what they're experiencing or seeing in another person. And how do we grow through each other's perspectives if we're not just honest with each other? We don't have to be jerks, but we can be frank, we can be direct. And so I think that your coaching style is rad. I like it a lot. And I think for people who are really serious and want to decide, who can recognize that they don't have it figured out, they have there's some humility, and they come to you, like, it's like, just put your story aside and really drop your guard and learn, and I think it's really effective for people who are ready for that type of interaction. So I like your style of coaching, honestly.
Appreciate you. Thank you for the nice words. I mean, I do that the same thing with someone who is ill and they're dealing with a legitimate illness. I don't totally disregard the quality of one's life, but I do want to reinforce that when we're interacting, now is a different time than then or there or whatever. So if you have the ability to muster now, I'd like to see what now looks like. And if you don't, that's a really good feedback system for me to be like, okay, you can't facilitate intensity or interactive social awareness while maintaining some degree of alertness that's outside of what your focus is. And every time that I poke a button, your alertness kind of just goes haywire. The only point is touching the nervous system to see what parts are not plugged in.
Yeah, man.
Tim, do you gotta take off here pretty quick?
I don't know. What time is it? 1:30. My wife keeps calling me. Let's see what she said. No big deal. She fell in love with a puppy. We got to talk. Let's just ignore that.
Nice. Congrats.
No room for that.
Yeah, well, it seems like you got enough room where you are. You live in a forest.
We got this big dog named Muna here. She's like a dire wolf, and she's like a big Akbash Pyrenees mix, and this is her domain. If other dogs are here, then they like run off and get into trouble and stuff.
Yeah, I guess you live in a very interesting place. Like your environment is maybe not quite so close to an apartment building as it is. Yeah, just like being in a wilderness heavy area where it seems like there's people around you, but people aren't crammed together. Everyone has their own space. Do you? I assume you've probably lived in a more metropolitan area. You kind of have the reference of like what it's like to be in the middle of a city where it's kind of just like wall to wall. Everyone's crammed in next to each other.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I grew up in the suburbs of Orange County. So granted, it was less developed when, yeah, dude, I was running up to LA all the time for shows. And yeah, so I grew up down there, and yeah, I basically just ran away when I was like 23 years old. I spent a year in Hawaii living off grid in the jungle, and then that's right before I moved to Crestone. And I lived in Crestone for 12 years, 13 years, 6 of those years on retreat, the first years. And my brother still lives there with my nieces and nephews. And that's a really, really small, it's the poorest county in Colorado, I believe, still. It's an old mining town that's at the end of a dead end road backed up to these 14,000-foot mountains. There's no restaurants. There's one little restaurant. There's one little co-op. There's nothing there. There's no industry. There's no movie theater. There's nothing. And so it's mostly people that go to be on retreat. It's like, do you know who the Karmapa is in the Buddhist tradition? So there's like the Dalai Lama. Everybody's heard of the Dalai Lama. Yeah? No?
Yeah.
And then below them is the Karmapa. And so a very famous and renowned Buddhist teacher in the 16th Karmapa, back in, I think, the 80s, he like went to Crestone, Colorado, and he said, this is the second Tibet. And then that made a bunch of all the spiritual factions came and built a temple out there. And so it kind of just became this place that to this day is a place that people go to do cultivation practice. Some people are on lifelong retreat in the wilderness out there, never to see another person and such. So yeah, I ended up being out there, very removed from people, all off-grid homes, very small population, like 1,000 people, maybe 2,000 people, 100 proper in the actual town of Crestone. And yeah, where I live now, I live on a big off-grid property with a few different families that have known each other for close to a decade. My friend Scott, who owns this place, I met him on retreat. Actually, we lived on retreat with each other for 2 years, and 1,000 hours or more of sitting practice at 5 a.m. with each other and stuff like this. So he's a really close friend of mine. His wife's one of my best friends, and there's like 12 kids here, and so all our kids just, yeah, there's a couple other families, and then the kids all just rummage around, just building forts. We have a little forest school where they basically learn friction fire and nature awareness games and just do ninja shit, So, and then like, yeah, some of us go to town to train, or I go to town to train people, and other people go to town for work and for grocery store and things like this. And then we come back out here, and yeah, maybe we'll have some movement retreats out here. I know we've talked about that before, but we got a lot of space for doing some pretty cool stuff like that.
Rad. I want to
Yeah.
be in that area, or at least Washington, in July.
Where in Washington?
I don't remember. My friend's wedding.
Cool.
Yeah, we might have to set up some around that time. But I imagine, Tim, that you're not going back to city life. This is kind of where you'd want to be for the foreseeable future.
I honestly have a hard time being in town for more than a couple hours. Like,
yeah,
driving around and like all this and that, and yeah, there's like this one park that I train people at, and so I spend most of my time at this park training people outside. I don't have a gym or anything. I train people exclusively outside, even in the winter. So if you want to train with me, you got to be able to deal with the cold and shit. So yeah, definitely not moving back to the city, but I can pop into the city for a minute.
A couple minutes. Yeah, I think it's humans, I think, will inevitably thrive way more in environments like that, but unfortunately the reality is city life for so many people. And I guess, yeah, what you kind of like went to the far edge of, I need to just get completely off grid for a significant amount of time to like reset myself. And I wonder if that's going to be something that more and more and more people start to do.
I bet. I mean, I don't think that we can really escape our biology. regardless of how fast technology advances, you know, augmented reality, virtual reality. Like I just saw this ad for the Apple thing coming out where you can just like sit on your couch and go anywhere in the world and just have like you're just inside this thing. I'm like, that's just gonna make humans sick, man. It's just gonna make humans sick. And so I think retreating to the wilderness and nature, you know, people online see me out here like, oh, he's barefoot in nature. What's up with this freak? You know, it's like people, I get trashed at least a third of the amount of praise I get on there. And like, what a novel thing. Like, I'm out in the woods, you know, doing self massage in the morning, getting morning light in my eyes. Like, look at this freak. It's like, it's just, we're going in a strange direction, in my opinion. And it'll be interesting to see what happens for sure. But I think that like getting to the wilderness is going to be more and more novel and never less important for the human animal. Yeah, I don't see how we can divorce ourselves from nature. I just don't see how it's going to happen. So we'll see what happens.
Cool.
I agree with you. Cool,
All
man.
right.
Well, I think I'm fried for the end of this. I appreciate you being on. I appreciate you you taking the time.
Dude, I love you guys. I appreciate your work so much and both your coaching styles and yeah, I had some things I wanted to say to you guys just on the air. I just appreciate what MoveMed is so deeply. Like the way that you are putting MoveMed out into the world. When I see all the gatekeeping that's happening and like the desire for notoriety and like being like, it's just I can just tell that you truly want to help people, and so your message is just like getting put out there, and I feel proud to represent your company, and I feel grateful that I have the tools that you guys have instilled with me, and yeah, I just want to say thank you to you guys, man. I just appreciate you guys so much.
You're the man, dude. I'm grateful to have you representing us, and you do a wonderful job. I mean, not just representing us, but your own business looks to be on its way to really making it clear how to demonstrate to other people what a good-looking business is, just by way of who you are as a person.
Yeah, man, it's
Thanks,
awesome. It's awesome to have. I mean, all the coaches that we've run through have their own strengths and whatnot, and it's cool to have somebody with your experience, kind of living in the environment that you are, seeing just as much benefit as somebody who maybe lives in the city and is using these tools as a way just to cope with that. And yeah, your messaging as a whole is very much needed in modern times. So I'm excited to kind of see, as you're very early on in whatever your business is, to see where it grows. And yeah, there's lots of opportunities for us to get together and put on some cool retreats or whatever it ends up being. So thanks for learning with us, man, and being an awesome student.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciate you.
All right, guys. We'll call it there.
See you, brothers.
Have a wonderful rest of your day, guys. Thanks
You
for your
too,
time.
man.